Ladies, welcome back to the podcast. So today we are talking about a very important topic, which I've talked about before, but this is going to be a different take on it, which is Hashimoto's. Now, this is a growing epidemic for women right now. I feel like I just see it more and more and more as the years go on. And so I think it's really relevant that we discuss this often. Because there's always new information coming out about it. And my guest today is somebody that I've actually been following for a while and have wanted to get on the podcast. So I'm excited to introduce you to Dr. Anshul Gupta. He is a best-selling author, speaker, researcher, and the world expert in Hashimoto's disease. He educates people worldwide on reversing Hashimoto's disease. He is a board-certified family medicine physician with advanced certification in functional medicine, peptide therapy, and also fellowship trained in integrative medicine. He has worked at the prestigious Cleveland Clinic Department of Functional Medicine alongside Dr. Mark Hyman. He has helped thousands of patients to reverse their health issues by using the concepts of functional medicine. So welcome to the show, Dr. Gupta.
Thank you so much, Karen, for having me on the show. You are doing amazing work with sharing great information and knowledge with your listeners. So I'm privileged to be here to share my take, or my information on Hashimoto's disease.
Amazing. Yeah. And I know about you actually through my friend, Annabelle Bateman, who I know you've had on your podcast, our friend, mutual friend from Australia, who is so lovely. I've been on her show a couple of times and I love her, but she speaks super
Absolutely.
highly of you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. She's
Yes.
such a nice person, like she has connected with me to so many people, and she's always generous in
Yes.
connecting and contributing to this kind of ever growing field of healthcare practitioner in the Hashimoto's field.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. So let's just jump right in. And I just want you to start out actually by explaining Hashimoto's, how it affects the thyroid gland and how it differs from traditional, like you've got hypothyroidism.
Absolutely. So Hashimoto's disease is an autoimmune condition of the thyroid gland. What is happening in the body is that the body is making antibodies, which starts a slow destruction of the thyroid gland. Now, this destruction can lead to ultimately hypothyroidism, and that's where majority of the people are being diagnosed with a low thyroid. But this destruction can happen for weeks to months to years, and finally it is detected by this blood work of TSH, which most females get. But in reality, they might be suffering from symptoms for a very, very long time, and obviously they have not given any help because their blood work is not showing that something is wrong with the thyroid because they're not getting the complete blood work done.
Yeah, because there's two antibodies to check for, correct?
That is correct. Yes, two antibody levels to check for it. One is TPO, which is a thyroid peroxidase antibody, and the other one is thyroglobulin antibodies. And if any of these antibodies are high above the normal range of that particular lab, that tells you that you are developing Hashimoto's disease. A lot of doctors will say, well, yes, you have Hashimoto's disease, but your TSH is normal. So nothing to do about it. Just go home, relax, let your thyroid being destroyed and come back to see us whenever your thyroid is completely destroyed and your TSH is affected. We are going to start you on the levothyroxine. That's the most common or the only treatment available for Hashimoto's patients.
Yes, it's really, I'm in Canada and I will tell you, nobody ever tests antibodies unless you request it. And if you request it, they typically will only ever check the TPO, never the TGA. And it's possible to have either one elevated, correct?
That is correct. TPO is the most common. More than 70% of Hashimoto's patients will have TPO antibodies elevated. But TG is also the second most common antibody being elevated. So what happens is that, like if you only order TPO antibodies, and sometimes you do miss that 40% of people who might have the TG antibodies. So by combining both TG and TPO, that range, like that you can detect of Hashimoto's goes up to 80 to 90%. Now, there is still 10 to 20% of people who will be antibody negative Hashimoto's disease, which will have all the classical symptoms of Hashimoto's and blood work will never show it. But it's a very small number, though.
Okay. And I've heard, and I'm wanting to ask you this question, is I've heard some functional practitioners say, even if you have antibodies of like 2 or 5, like smaller numbers, or within, or even if it's just within the range, even the bottom of the range, that means 100% you've got Hashimoto's, any antibodies at all. And I look at people's blood work all day long, their thyroid panels. I can tell you, I rarely see anybody with zero.
So I'm a researcher, right? So I believe in what the research says. So the research is very clear. So the way the labs are made, it's very important, because as a clinician, most of the time we are not even aware how the labs are being tested. How are those lab machines being calibrated? Until I became a functional medicine doctor and I started kind of like figuring out what is happening in the lab. So the problem with lab machines is that each and every lab machine has to be calibrated very differently. There are certain national standards according to which majority of the lab machines are calibrated. But these calibration changes, from country to country. And from time to time, that can change. So that's the reason they have always show this range, to kind of just have those errors in place. So I don't completely believe that, if you're on the lower end of those antibody levels, that you do have Hashimoto's. There is no research suggesting it. There is not a single paper which will say that, okay, well, if you're on the lower end of even the normal antibody levels, you will have it. It's the error. Like the lab has to have that kind of, amount of leverage in terms of what their machine is showing and how much machine can run those blood work, right? Because let's say a busy clinic will run 100 samples, of those antibodies, while a particular clinic will only run 10 samples. So when they run more samples, then obviously the machine breaks down a little bit more and it needs more calibration. So those machines will show some antibodies in there because obviously they're losing that calibration over the course of time.
Okay. And that's great. Thank you for clarifying that, because I agree. That's kind of I came to the conclusion like that's not true, because we'd all be walking around then with Hashimoto's diagnosis, right? Like there's just too many people that have some degree, and I'll have clients come to me super concerned because they heard somebody on a podcast and said, "Oh, look, I got 2 antibodies, just 2," and they're freaking out because I'm like, "Look, I see like people with true Hashimoto's, they can be in the hundreds, so, and even thousands, I think too, right? For TPO,
Oh
like
yes,
one of
like the
them goes
highest
really high."
Yeah, so again, that different labs like can go up to different ranges.
Okay.
Most commonly, like in US and Canada, you will see like either more than 2,000 or 3,000. That's the maximum they will get. But one person actually recently came and made me from Malaysia, and her antibody levels were like 17,000. So,
No.
so I was like, really? That's really high. I didn't even knew like the labs can check that high amount of antibodies, and sure enough, like that was the case with her.
Did you retest to see if it came out the same?
No, we just started working. So, like
Yes. Yeah.
we like, and generally the antibody levels will take 4 to 6 months to come down. So generally, like when we start working with our clients, at the end of like second or third month is where we recheck it to see if we are going in the right direction.
Okay.
And obviously, we have been doing it for a long time. So most of our clients, I will say 80 to 90% of our clients, their antibody levels will go down. Now, obviously,
Yes.
like from 17,000, we don't expect it to come to like zero or anything in 2 or 3 months. But if we start seeing a trend that, it is going down, that is very, very reassuring that whatever we are doing is working. And,
Right.
at least the thyroid is now moving the right direction.
Right. So who is at most risk for it? And are we seeing it, Dr. Gilbert, mostly in North American women? Is that like where the highest rates are right now? Or is this a worldwide thing that we're just seeing more and more Hashimoto's because it's just maybe being properly diagnosed, and yeah, just who's more susceptible to it?
So still the most susceptible population is the middle-aged females, starting from 30 to going around 65. That's the most common people who will get Hashimoto's disease. But now
Interesting.
we are seeing an increase in incidence of males being affected with Hashimoto's and also children being affected with Hashimoto's as early as ages of like 4 or 5 and definitely going into the adolescent. Now, the second part of the question was that, is it more common in like North American population? No.
Okay.
So Hashimoto's disease is the most common autoimmune condition worldwide.
Well,
Not
okay.
only in America,
Why?
worldwide. Yes. So we
Wow.
don't even know that, like what is a proper incidence of Hashimoto's disease, because again, it is often undiagnosed.
Right.
Because the way the conventional medicine functions is that they don't check antibodies, as you said. So that is not the norm. But we know that even beyond millions and millions of people, there are other subset of people who have not been diagnosed with Hashimoto's and they're walking around. So it is just not over here in North America. It's like all over the world that, females are, especially middle-aged females, are being diagnosed with Hashimoto's and they have it.
Yeah, I wonder how much, like, I'm a hormone specialist, and so that age range is when our hormones start dropping and then almost completely disappear for some women. And so I wonder how much that affects the development of Hashimoto's, because we know that estrogen is really important, and so is progesterone for the immune system. So something there?
It is,
Yeah.
yes. So the reason females are more complicated are because of their hormonal system. And they go to these cascades of hormonal shifts, right?
Yeah.
When they're going through puberty, suddenly, their hormonal surges starts happening. Every month, they're going through these cycles of hormones. And the bigger cycles happen around pregnancy and menopause. So we see that several females do get diagnosed with Hashimoto's or thyroid disorders, especially after delivery, postpartum. Often it is labeled that, oh, it is just the stress of delivering the baby, so that's the reason you got thyroid disorders. But in reality, it is actually the changing of the hormones with the other stress that is causing it. And similar again, after menopause, we see again a very big rise in Hashimoto's disease, again because, as you suggested, that females are being taken away all the protective hormones away from their body, like estrogen and progesterone. So that definitely triggers not only Hashimoto's disease, but other autoimmune conditions also.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting, because that's when I found mine out. Was I don't have Hashimoto's, but I got hypothyroidism. But it happened after the birth of my first child, where everything went to crap, and then to put it eloquently, and then again, my thyroid kind of crashed, I would say, after when I started to go into menopause. So yeah, both times that's what triggered it for me. But yeah, very interesting. I think there's many factors to that. I would think too, is not even the hormonal shifts. Like, I think that's a big part of it, but also we're so nutrient deficient nowadays. And I've done a lot of research around, like, how a baby will basically, steal all of our nutrients out of our system to feed the baby. And that we are so nutrient deficient now that we should be waiting like 4 years between having children just to build those stores back up again. So you can imagine that without those important nutrients for thyroid function and for immune function, that would also play a part in that.
Absolutely. So, like again, when I say anything about pregnancy or deliveries, I don't mean that, people should not get pregnant or,
Yeah.
it's the
Yeah.
fault of the
Me
females
neither.
of
Yeah.
doing it. But it's just the awareness. We are
Yeah.
not preparing our females, like for pregnancies, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because pregnancy, as you suggested, it's a pretty big undertaking for a female's body, because like you're not only supporting your body, but you're also supporting another body that needs all this vital nutrients, vitamins, minerals, to function. And obviously your body prioritizes at that time, the fetus which is growing inside your body as compared to your own body, right? And oftentimes we are already low in so many vitamins and minerals, to start off with. And definitely at the end of the pregnancy we are all done. And then if you have another baby, like in the next couple of years, then you're so depleted, then your body is barely functioning. So I always suggest, like, females who are of the childbearing age, so that before they are trying to get pregnant, just give your body 5 or 6 months, work on that body, improve your body's health, like the nutrients that your body needs and your baby will need, just replenish those before itself. And then obviously, like, there'll be very, very less chances of having any bad outcomes in the pregnancy, plus like having any bad outcomes after delivery of like Hashimoto's disease or even thyroid conditions.
Yeah. Great. So if somebody then, they suspect that maybe they have a slow metabolism, which is usually what will send a woman into her doctor's office. And let's say they do a thyroid, at least a TSH and free T3, free T4, everything's normal, everything's in normal range. But like you said, somebody could have the symptoms of Hashimoto. So what do those besides the slow metabolism, what is a person looking for that would maybe say, oh, maybe I've got an autoimmune thyroid problem?
So the problem is that there are a number of symptoms. And these are so common that that's the reason we have to have a very high index of suspicion of
Mhm.
checking these antibodies. So the symptoms actually start with, being tired or being fatigued a lot of times, having brain fog symptoms that, they feel that they're forgetting things. They're not able to keep up, with events around them. They're not able to concentrate, on things. Then they are gaining weight or not able to lose weight. Then mood swings, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, feeling stressed out, then having gut issues, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, then obviously having infertility issues, then feeling cold all the time, then having hair problems, hair thinning, or hair falling out, or having skin problems like eczema, hives, or dry skin. So these are so many different symptoms that Hashimoto's can come up with. So along with slow metabolism, if you have any of the other symptoms, then again it just makes sense to make sure that you do get checked for Hashimoto's disease also. Because the good part is that if you're at very early stages of Hashimoto's disease, because your TSH or your T3 and T4 are not affected yet, then there is a very high chance that you can reverse it and you might not need medicines in the future.
Mhm. If you are you've progressed and you've got you've got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you've had it for many years, let's say, and so it's actively, when you explained it, it's, we're actively destroying the thyroid gland. At what point can we not come back from that? Like, is there a point, or is there always a chance that we can reverse it no matter what condition the thyroid's in?
So yeah, so ultimately what happens is that these antibodies leads to fibrosis of the thyroid gland, right? And that fibrosis is basically dead tissue. And there is
Mhm.
no way that we can revive that dead tissue. Okay. So now again in Hashimoto, there are two things. First of all, is that when your thyroid does get destroyed, you need external thyroid hormone replacement. And the second thing is the autoimmune part of it.
Mhm.
Now, this autoimmune part, even though if your thyroid gets completely destroyed, it is not going to stop. It is going to start destroying other parts of your body. And that's the reason research suggests that once you get autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's disease, there is a very, very high likelihood that in your lifetime, you will get a second autoimmune condition, whether 10 years or 5 years or 15 years down the lane.
Mhm.
So now females who have had Hashimoto's disease for a long time, their thyroid might be fibrosed. And in that situation, they might need some support of an external thyroid hormone because now their body is just not able to produce enough thyroid hormone. But the thyroid hormone replacement is not doing anything for the autoimmune side of Hashimoto's disease. It is still destroying your body. After done with your thyroid, it is going to start destroying other parts of your body.
Mhm.
And that's where I tell people or females is that, when you do things that we are going to tell you to do, maybe you might need certain medications to help your thyroid hormone, but you will prevent any further destruction of your thyroid gland and you will prevent developing any other autoimmune conditions. So that's a very important piece that a lot of people have to understand is that because the medicines are not doing anything for the autoimmune condition, they're only supporting your body's thyroid hormone replacement. And if you don't work on that autoimmune conditions, you will get into more trouble.
Yeah, yeah. So what are your favorite tips then for dealing with the immune side of it? Which I have actually heard that Hashimoto's, they call it like the gateway autoimmune condition. And it's typically the first to arrive. And then, yes, you're opening up the doors for more to come along.
So Hashimoto's disease, what I figured out was that, the research suggests that it's an interplay between your genetic makeup and the environment around a person.
Mm.
Now, we cannot change anybody's genes, but that doesn't mean that, if you do have a particular genes that you are going to get Hashimoto's disease. There are two sides to it. One is the genes and the second one is the environment. So if we can control the environment, then we can actually reverse Hashimoto's as well as, we might not be able to kind of present as a Hashimoto's patients in the future. So there are five major environmental factors which I have kind of seen which contributes to Hashimoto's. The very first one is food, right? So we see that food is medicine, but at the same time, wrong foods can lead to Hashimoto's disease. we are seeing a very increase in food sensitivities to gluten, dairy, soy, corn, sugars, all of those things, right? So those food sensitivity play a very, very important role in causing or triggering Hashimoto's disease. So that's the first thing, that's a very big trigger. The second trigger, as we suggested, was stress. And this is like physical stress, emotional stress, mental stress, spiritual stress, any kind of stress your body goes through. Then again, that can be a very big trigger of Hashimoto's, and pregnancies, menopause comes into this kind of category of stressor because the females are going through that.
Mm-hmm.
The third one is toxins. We are living in a toxic world. Every day there is a new chemical which is being poured into our environment. Now what happens is that our thyroid gland is very, very sensitive to these toxins. Thyroid gland is like a sponge. Any small amount of toxin that a body get exposed to, like it directly goes to the thyroid gland and actually affects it. So over the course of years and years of slow exposure to small amount of toxins, finally we reach that level where the thyroid gland gets destroyed and triggered Hashimoto's disease. And the next one is nutritional deficiencies. As you pointed out, that like thyroid gland needs a lot of different vitamins and minerals to make thyroid hormone to support our body. And again, our food itself is currently actually low in vitamins and minerals. There was a research study done which compared the nutritious value of the crops of the food from 1980s to currently in 2000. And it showed that our current crops are low in a lot of different vitamins and minerals, especially which are needed by the thyroid gland, like selenium, magnesium, manganese, zinc. And those things are lower in our food. So even though we might be eating the best food, our body is low into them because our food is low into them. So nutritional deficiencies are again a big trigger. And the last one is infections. We already know Epstein-Barr virus infection has been associated with Hashimoto's disease. So reactivation of Epstein-Barr is very important. Certain parasites in our gut, like blastocystis, again has been shown to be associated with Hashimoto's disease. Similarly, other viral infections, even we are seeing an increased rate of Hashimoto's disease after COVID infections. So that is also another virus which can trigger it. Plus other parasites, candida infections. So a whole bunch of these infections can also trigger Hashimoto's. So these are the big 5 factors
Mm-hmm.
which are the root causes of majority of the people with Hashimoto's disease. Now the problem is here. Most people are looking for that one root cause, and that's where people fail. What I've identified is that most females will have 2+ root causes playing a role together, and that is leading the Hashimoto's disease. And unless we kind of work on all of the root causes, we are not able to reverse Hashimoto's disease.
Mm-hmm. What's your take on the autoimmune paleo diet for Hashimoto's?
So autoimmune paleo diet is great diet. The problem is that it is very restrictive.
It is, yeah.
And so for people to sustain that for lifelong, I think it's very, very difficult. So what I do is that, I'm a little bit more generous with my clients. I tell them, like, maybe for a short amount of time, make your life miserable.
Yeah.
Okay. So that
Yeah.
we can calm things down. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we do a very similar diet to autoimmune paleo, not exactly the same. And so that we can calm the antibodies, we can calm the inflammation. And then after that, we become a little bit more generous and then start adding one category of food at a time to see how their body does with that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think autoimmune paleo diet sometimes over the long term basis can cause nutritional deficiencies
Mm-hmm.
if not done correctly. You have
Mm-hmm.
to pay very close attention to the kind of nutrients each and every food has it, and we have to have a very balanced diet in that situation. So it's very difficult for a lot of people, who are just busy in their lives to keep up with it on the long term basis.
Yeah, it's super, super hard. I find the same thing. And I also have seen too in my practice that the longer somebody is on an autoimmune paleo diet, that they will start to develop more food sensitivities. It's like they start to restrict and then they got to restrict more because they'll just start eating the same foods all the time because it's hard. And then they develop a sensitivity to those foods. And so it's kind of it's a slippery slope that I think people have to be very careful about. And like you said, like do it for a short period of time and then start to reintroduce things and see, because not everybody's going to react to all the foods that are off that list of autoimmune. But one food that I think everybody needs to remove is gluten if you have Hashimoto's. And I try to explain why. And it's like, people are like, what? What do you mean it's the same genetic makeup and of thyroid? Can you explain that? Like, why is it
Yeah.
gluten and thyroid have this like cross reactivity with each other?
I think gluten has multiple problems. There is
Yeah.
just not one problem that we are actually identifying. More and more research and more problems are being shown up. So the very most common problem is that, like the gluten molecule has a very similar molecular structure to the thyroid gland, which is we call as molecular mimicry. So what happens is that whenever, we are consuming food like gluten, and body thinks it is not the same, like as the gluten that our body knew 100 years ago, and then it says okay, something foreign, so it kind of treats it as like a threat to the body, so it starts producing antibodies against the gluten molecule. And then because the thyroid gland structure is the molecular structure is very similar to the gluten, in the friendly fire, actually it starts destroying the thyroid gland. So that's kind of the molecular mimicry which happens between the gluten and the thyroid that does that, which can be genetic makeup. But also very important reason is that the gluten that we are consuming currently is completely different from the original gluten or wheat which was there in the wild. So because of the agriculture revolution, like which happened 100 years ago, we were changing our food at a very very rapid rate. So it is easier to grow, so it was resistant to kind of different kind of pests, and we can store it for a longer amount of time. Now when we are doing it, we actually accidentally kind of change the genetic makeup of it, because we were kind of doing something called natural selection. And we're not talking about just GMO crops, we're just talking about natural crops, but we are doing natural selection. So we were selecting the variety of wheat which was conducive to our environment. Now, what happens is that our body's genetic makeup doesn't change so quickly. It takes millions of years for our body's genetic makeups to change. And we have learned, we have associated, like interacted with our environment over the course of these millions of years. And then we have recognized different foods, different things around our environment based on their chemical structure. Now, because that chemical structure is different, our body doesn't recognize gluten anymore. And that's the reason, it attacks it. The second reason obviously is that the all the spraying which we are doing in the gluten crops, like the glyphosate, the pesticides and the insecticides, again that brings all that burden inside the body, and which leads to leaky gut. And when the leakier the gut is, the more reactive it becomes to gluten and other things. And that's another major reason that we are seeing an uptake of food sensitivity, especially towards the gluten things. So
Yes.
these are major problems with gluten that people have it, and that's the reason in Hashimoto's or any other autoimmune condition, for say, it's best to avoid gluten.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always the mimicry thing that people are like, how is that possible that the thyroid makeup is similar to the wheat makeup? And it's like, what? But that's the case. It's very interesting. Now, number two was emotional stress, things like that. Now, you've worked with thousands of Hashimoto's patients probably at this time. Do you find there's a connection? If we look at the chakras in the body, energy centers in the body, the thyroid sits in your voice chakra. And so have you seen in your practice that there is a relationship with that? Like where, and I wonder if this is why maybe women have it a little bit more too, because we tend to not speak our minds as much as men do. Maybe we're trapping or we're not saying what we really want to say in life. Do you see a connection with that with working with so many people doing this?
So I know stress plays an important role. Each and every female who do get diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I tell them what was happening in your life a year or 2 years before you got diagnosed. And invariably, there will be some stressful moment or thing that their body or they themselves went through that. So that was the case. Now, the problem with females is that like the current females are overburdened with stressful things in their life. They have to take care of their own family, their own husbands, their own children, then they have to take care of their own parents, then they are working outside, they have to take care of their house. Each and everything is responsible for them, so right, obviously, so the stress do pile up in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And again, as you said, there we do have all these different chakras. So the heart chakra also is very close, as well as our chakra in neck is very close. And again, females being more emotional, the heart chakra being so close again, and all these chakras are connected, right? And we feel the energy starts from a lower chakra and then goes up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if your heart chakra is also affected, again it affects the next chakra, which is in your neck, and that can also be another reason. And because the females are not able to voice their concerns, because who are they going to voice their concern to? because they themselves feel responsible, because of taking care of everyone around them. So if they complain or if they say anything about it, it just says that, okay, well, you're just complaining now. Why don't you just not do it, right? So there is no solution for things. And that's the reason I think a lot of females will just not voice their concern, and they will just go through all these emotional turmoils and all of these stress on their own. So
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in chakras, so I don't cannot say that how each chakra affects the thyroid directly, but I can definitely say that emotional and physical stress definitely is a very, very big trigger for Hashimoto's disease.
Yeah, I agree. Yes. I've worked a lot with chakras. I used to do a type of body work, and it had a lot to do with the chakras and kind of aligning them. And so I learned about it a very long time ago, and I do find it very fascinating. And I do think that that's probably a big piece of why I developed just hypothyroidism was I wasn't speaking up when I should have been at that time in my life. And I think that I think there's always an emotional component to any chronic illness. So I think it's an important piece for all of us to look at. And then if you've got Hashimoto's, like you said, really take a look at your life and the stress, and where can you ask for help? And I think that really does have to be part of it, part of the healing process. And like you said, you can't just pick one thing. We've got to look at all of the things that you talk about and see where are we being held up on all of those levels, right? I think it's very important.
Absolutely. Stress management is a top priority when people start working with us. They think that the top priority when they work with us will be the supplements. And I
Right.
tell you, yes, supplements are going to come last. But first, we need to fix your lifestyle. You need
Wow.
to fix your life. Unless the stress management things comes into place, things are not going to get better. And
Mhm.
trust me, even after me paying so much attention to it and telling my clients, still 40 to 50% of my clients still don't do it.
Oh, I
They
know.
feel,
Yeah.
well, everybody's stressed out. So what's a big deal about it, right?
Yep.
Because we are living in this world. I think it's a corporate language. Oh, well, stress is good, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Like the more stressed you are, the more performance improvement that gives you. So that's good. And I tell people, no, it's not correct. Stress, if your body is stressed out, it is sending you signals that, you are not handling it well. And I'm not saying that, okay, well, leave your job or leave your responsibilities. That is just not going to happen. But just inculcating these stress reduction exercises, your body will be able to take on more.
Mhm.
So doing simple meditations, simple, like yoga or deep breathing exercises or cultivating a hobby, relaxation, just 10 to 15 minutes is huge,
Yeah.
huge game changer in a lot of my clients. So I always start talking to them even before food. I talk about stress management as my first strategy, and then go to the food and then go to the supplements after that.
Mhm. Where does the medication come in for you? If somebody comes in, they've got Hashimoto's, they have an elevated TSH and maybe a slow T3 or T4, both. Do you jump right away to medication, or is that something that you take some time with?
So if they're already on medications, I'm not in a hurry to get them off the medicines.
Yeah.
Okay. A lot of people come to see us, they're on like, 75 micrograms or 100 micrograms. And if you just go into cold turkey, stop that medicine, your body is going to feel the brunt of it. If they have not yet started the medicine, then yes, that's a good opportunity for us to explore different options. Like desiccated thyroid is great for a lot of females, that works out good. Or even without that, through our natural ways of supporting the thyroid or improving the overall health and their root cause, then sometimes they don't even need the medicine. So I'm not in a hurry of starting anybody any medications, but if they're already on the medications, I'm not in a hurry to stop them either.
Mhm. If somebody's on medication for a long time, years and years, can you ever get them off, or does the body become so dependent on that medication?
So again, that answer has two kind of prongs to it. One
Mhm.
prong is that like, so why do we need medicines, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people are taking medicines, but still they have symptoms. So when after they work with us, their symptoms are really good. Even then they start stopping the medicine or going down the medicine, they still feel great. But the problem is that the body is now so dependent on the medicine. If you're going to look at the lab work, that TSH is going to go high once you stop the medicine. Nobody can do anything about it because that's the way of bodies to cope up with it.
Mm.
So if you're looking at the lab work and say that, okay, well, by working with you, will the TSH become normalized even after we stop the medicine? If you have been on the medicine for more than 5 years, that TSH is going to go up. Doesn't matter like whatever you do, if you stop the medicine. But if you're feeling great, if you're feeling fine, I said, well, then you can just watch your body. And then you can just keep an eye on the TSH and the other hormone levels. If your T3 and T4 are normal, that means your body is getting enough thyroid hormone. And why just to believe on the TSH part of it?
Right.
And then if you're not feeling good, then obviously your body is telling you that you need that medicine.
Right. And when somebody wants to try to come off their medication because they've done your 5 steps, they've read your amazing book, and they're ready to see, like, okay, let's see where my body's at without medication. Is there a certain way to do that? Because I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on that, like how
So
slow you
my
have to
again,
come off and stuff like that.
yeah, slowly, again, depending on the dosage of the medicine.
Right.
Up till 50 micrograms, it's very easy to get off the medicine, and it's very easy to stop the medicine. Beyond that, it becomes difficult and difficult. Beyond 100 micrograms, we have to be very, very careful, because that means the thyroid definitely has a lot of destruction happening. So those people, we kind of go very slow beyond 100 micrograms. And then like between like 50 to 100 micrograms, we start decreasing the medicine kind of every month and see how people are doing. And they're feeling okay and if the blood work is kind of stable, then we kind of keep them getting off of the medicine. But if they're like 25 or 37 or 50, those people, like depending on how they are doing, then sometimes we are able to stop the medicine very quickly.
Okay. Is the higher the medication, like, are you actually going to be destroying the thyroid when you're on high medication?
Yeah, because your thyroid is not able to produce enough thyroid hormone, and that's the reason you need more and more external support of the medicine to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it has two components to it. One component is that sometimes in acute phases when you're having a flare up, of Hashimoto's disease, because of that all that inflammation, which does destroy a very short amount of time your thyroid gland. So your medicine dosage might needs to be increased, but that doesn't mean that is leading to fibrosis, because as the inflammation settles down, then sometimes like you need lesser amount of the medicine. So when people work with us, they are in very, very highly inflamed state. So by decreasing that inflammation, we are able to like quickly reduce the dosage of medicine. So in those people, it's very easy, even though they are on the higher dosage. But people who have had disease for like 10, 15 years, and they have been on more than 100 micrograms for, let's say, 5 years or so, then their body is telling us that they're not in the acute phase. Now they are come into this chronic fibrotic phase where the thyroid is destroyed and is not able to produce enough thyroid hormone.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. So what is your take on low dose naltrexone? Because that's a real big game changer for a lot of Hashimoto's patients. Maybe you could explain what it is, and do you use it in your practice?
Yeah, so naltrexone was actually basically an opioid antagonist, right? It was used in a people who had opioid addiction. Now, somehow, like, a couple of years ago, like, I think it was a chance discovery that somebody was using it at a very, very low dosage for some people, and they realized it does the opposite effect of what it's supposed to do at the high dosage. So they saw some benefit in improving pain. They saw an improvement in reducing inflammation. So they actually started exploring what does it do. So again, it works on the opioid receptors, and we feel the opioid receptors actually play a very, very important role in our immune process. We feel opioid receptors are only important for pain, but actually they are also very important for immunity. They are also very important to kind of reducing inflammation in the body. So at a lower dosage, like the LDN, which is a low dose naltrexone, improves our autoimmune process. And actually, there are a couple of research studies which do support that in using in Hashimoto's disease, their antibody levels did go down by using low dose naltrexone. So the good part about low dose naltrexone is that it doesn't have any much side effects. So it is not a medicine as such. It is pretty safe because we're using it at very low doses. So literally, I have not seen much side effects from it. Now, by using LDN for a long time, I was kind of a little bit confused of what it is actually doing for my clients. Because without the LDN also, the antibody levels were coming down and people were doing good. And with using the LDN, still it took the same amount of time. And just only LDN only helps with reducing the antibody levels. It was not doing much other than that. So that's the reason I'm not using LDN that much. And without using the LDN also, we are getting great results. So my always process is that, well, why to use any more things if we don't have to?
Mhm.
So LDN alone was never a game changer for me, that, if I just put anybody LDN and it will just reverse Hashimoto's for anybody, that was not happening. But if somebody is on LDN and they have access to a practitioner who can give LDN, then I say, yeah, why not? It doesn't hurt. There is no
Yeah.
side effect. Maybe it will help you out. So I think it's a great like one more tool in our toolbox.
Yeah.
I think especially for people who have very high amount of antibodies and it is taking a long time for them to actually reduce their antibodies, those are special people that I think LDN can be very big game changer, because that can definitely reduce their antibodies at a faster rate.
Right. Yeah, interesting, because I started it because I did exactly what you say to do, and I looked at all of these factors in my life, and found out that I had really high levels of mercury and lead in my body. So I started to do heavy metal chelation, and that sent my body into, like, I don't know what happened, but it kind of crashed my metabolism. I started to gain weight from every time I would do kind of a round of chelation, I'd gain weight every single time and not have changed anything. So I heard that if you take LDN, that could help with that piece. So I thought, okay, well, I'll give it a go. And I went on it, and I didn't notice anything for a bit. And then I realized, oh, I'm not gaining weight anymore. And then I was slowly starting to lose weight. So I could chelate safely, and I was not gaining weight from it. And then 9 months down the road, I realized that all of my histamine intolerance went away. My gut system was better. I had no more arthritis in my hands and my wrists. I was like, oh, and so I actually went off the LDN to go, is this what's happening here? And sure enough, within about 2 months, all these little symptoms started to creep back up again. So it hadn't cured it, but it certainly really helped to improve the immune system. But it happened in a really slow and subtle way. So I always tell people, I'm like, it's not this like big kapow, it's a miracle thing that's going to cure you of your thyroid problems. But in the long run, it can help with the immune system, which then has a waterfall effect, because who knows what is like what's happening in your body from that compromised immune system. And it kind of shows up in different ways. Mine was histamine, somebody else's might be something else. So it has really, really helped with that piece of it for myself. So
No, I agree with that. The problem is that when people are coming with us, like they're such a bad shape, they want to kind of get quickly fixed. So
right.
we have made this kind of 4 to 6 months of a protocol where we kind of literally like rejuvenates people's body. So an LDN, as you said, works very slowly. So I
Yeah.
was like telling people that it is not going to do anything for you initially. You have to take it at least a minimum of 4 months. Like otherwise it is just not going to do anything for you.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, I don't have patience to use it in that amount of time because I'm already on this bucket load of supplements and things. So I said, okay, well, if you choose between the supplements and the LDN, then definitely like supplements, I know that I can fix you within 4 to 6 months. So definitely that's a priority. But this is definitely a great thing. But if that you're absolutely correct that it has to be taken for more than 4 months to actually start showing any change in the body.
Yeah.
And again, like if you have access to, like again, I tell people is that if you do have access to LDN, if you can use it, absolutely use it, because literally, like, we just cannot find any side effects, of
Yeah.
LDN.
Yeah.
So
So
I think
safe.
it's a great miracle thing, which does work in a lot of people, especially they have arthritis issues, a lot of inflammation in their body, and high antibodies. I think it's a very great tool.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I see that you're a peptide therapy expert as well. So do you use peptides then, like or bioregulator peptides, regular peptides?
Yeah. So again, like peptides is an emerging field, right?
Yeah.
Of medicine that, we are all kind of, still exploring and still learning. So not each and every client that I use peptides into, but this is another like tool in my toolbox. When I feel necessary, then I use it. There are a couple of peptides, that has shown to be beneficial, especially in Hashimoto's disease. One is like the TA1, which is a thymosin alpha 1. Like it's an immune modulator. We know that it, regulates our autoimmunity in our body. And we have like, very small couple of research studies, especially for Hashimoto's disease, that, it did actually decrease the antibody levels and also improve the functioning of the thyroid gland at the same time. So that's the reason, again, TA1 is a very nice peptide because it does help with immunity. So a lot of like Hashimoto's clients do have chronic infections like Lyme or viral infections or parasites. So TA1 is very useful for it. And the second one TA1 is useful is for histamine intolerances. So
Mhm.
again, like as you were having, a lot of people with Hashimoto's disease will have mast cell or histamine intolerances to the point that they will not even tolerate supplements. So for those people using TA1 initially and then using supplements, that actually worked for them because they were able to tolerate things better. So I think TA1 is one of those great peptides, which I think can help a lot of Hashimoto's clients. The second one is BPC. Now, BPC 157 is a common peptide a lot of people have been using for a long time, mainly for in the weight training exercises because, like for all the injuries, because it does help with ligamentous and muscular injury. But what people don't know is that BPC actually originated in our gut. So it is actually our gut makes BPC as a natural way. So it has gut protection ability. So a lot of people with Hashimoto's again have leaky gut issues, have SIBO issues, which is an overgrowth of bacteria, or have overgrowth of candida and problems. So BPC I think is a very great peptide, which not only helps to heal their leaky gut, helps improve the gut immunity, and they are able to fight off these bacteria and viruses and improves the gut functioning. And obviously, if they have any joint pains or if they have like body pains, then BPC is useful for that also. So I think these are two very standard peptides that, I think a lot of our clients with Hashimoto's disease see benefit. And again, I am this person that, if there is no harm, why not use
Mhm.
it? So these two
Mhm.
peptides are pretty safe, like very, very less side effects, I will say, if any. With peptides, obviously, I'm careful that what person is doing, what is their medical history. A lot of people are just buying peptides, on internet and using them. I totally kind of say that's not a right thing to do because although they are safe, but still, we have to use it in proper fashion. So once we use them in proper fashion, then these can be very, very useful for a lot of Hashimoto's clients.
Mhm. What about the bioregulator, the thyroid one? Have you ever used that one? I think it's called Thyrogen.
Yeah, so I mean, it actually more recent. So
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
not kind of used it a lot of in my clients
Yeah.
because unless I'm 100% sure about something, I don't kind of use it. So in our peptide groups, like still like kind of I'm getting those fillers out and some of if somebody is using it, have they seen any benefit from it or not? So until I get some positive feedback from other people, I just don't feel very comfortable in using anything in my clients unless I'm 100% sure.
Yeah. I haven't heard much from bioregulators. I just recently, one client had been using a bunch of them, and we did see an improvement on her hormone levels, and she was using the ovarian one. So I was like, okay, that's the first time I've actually seen proof that this actually might have worked. But I had somebody this morning, she said, what should I use for my thyroid problem, LDN or Thymogen? And I'm like, oh, I said, I don't know. I said, I don't have enough experience with that bioregulator to know if if it could work or not. But it's interesting. And I'm interested to see where it's going to go.
Exactly. And I think that's the whole peptide world, is so emerging, especially bioregulators are even much more newer. So
Mhm.
we don't have experience, right? There are not many practitioners who are using it. So
Mhm.
again, yes, they seem promising, but majority of the research or majority of people who have used them are basically either in animals or in laboratory. So who is going to be that first person who feels comfortable using them in their clients or patients? We just have to wait and watch.
Yeah.
So I'm always on the back seat of those things. I'm not that adventurous of sitting on the front seat and kind of driving. Okay, well, I am going to try that first. I'm actually the opposite. I'm always on the back seat. Okay, well, let other people use it. Once
Right.
I'm comfortable, then only I'm going to use it. So I even with supplements, like whenever something comes out, either I'm going to try it on myself or like I'm going to kind of hear stories from other practitioners once they're safe, because safety is the most priority for me.
Mhm.
I don't want to do any harm to any of my clients. So I'm very
Mhm.
upfront with them that if I'm not sure about anything, I'm going to let you know. Now, obviously, the choice is yours. If you want to use it, that's fine. But if I'm not comfortable, I don't have enough data to say that, okay, this is good and there is good safety data about it, I'm not going to use it.
Mhm. So when patients come to you and put them on your protocol, how quickly are you seeing results with people?
So symptom wise, within 4 to 6 weeks,
Wow.
they start feeling better. Their energy levels gets better, their mood is more stable, their gut is stabilizing in that manner. So all of those things is happening in 4 to 6 weeks. But I think I call the magical month is like the third month.
Ah,
End of second month to third month is a magical month where the suddenly like their body shifts and they start feeling really good. Their energy is really great, like they're able to do so many things, their mood is stable, they lose weight. All of those things happen in that magical month. So I always tell people like, end of 2 months or the third month somehow is a magical month in our protocol, that you can feel very, very substantial difference. And that's the amount of time it takes for the antibody also to come down. So at
right.
the end of 3 months or 4 months, we want to repeat their lab work to see if their antibodies are coming down. And I will say almost 70 to 80% of our clients, like their antibodies do show that, they are in the downward trend by that time.
Yeah, that's funny because it's usually the same timing for hormones too. Whether you're replacing hormones or you're trying to balance something out. I always tell women like 2 months at the very least, but you're looking at 3 months solid before you're going to redo labs and really see what just happened with what you did. So it's a 3 month is the magic number for me as well. Okay, so you've got a book. So what's in your book that people like, what are people going to get from your book?
Yeah, so the book, the kind of came into place was that, like people have written book on Hashimoto's, but I think they were like very, very medically driven. Like they were so thick, and a lot of people will get lost into like the medical like terminologies on what exactly is going on. So I want to write a book in a very simple language where anybody like, on a layman who has Hashimoto's or they feel they have it, just read it, understand it, and then give them like a stepwise protocol where they can implement today itself so that they can see a difference. So that's where, like develop this 3-step process. And then I discuss that in the book. The very first step is basically kind of figuring out the root cause, right?
Right.
So like I have given certain questionnaires, in the book where people can give them some ideas about what potential root causes are playing a role. Because otherwise, like people will look at all these 5 big categories and they will completely get lost. Okay, well, I don't know which categories are applicable to me. So by doing those questionnaires, by kind of, introspecting on some of those things and some symptoms, people can find maybe, okay, well, I have these 2 or 3 root causes. So that's the very first step of figuring out the root cause. And the second step is start fixing the thyroid, fixing, some of the deficiencies that people have. That's where, the diet comes into place. So I've developed this something called mitothyroid diet, which is very specific for Hashimoto's clients. Again, like what food to eat, what not to eat, which is a thyroid friendly foods, all of those things is what we talk about in that. And the same time, we talk about some nutritional supplements which can support the thyroid gland in that second step. And the third step is removing the toxicities, removing the toxicities of stress, removing the toxicity of toxins, as well as removing the toxicities of all these chronic infections. So we talk about like how to lower the burden of toxins around the body, like how to improve your body's immunity in general, and then obviously the stress reduction techniques. So
Mhm.
that's what, like the 3 steps are laid out. And it's more so like people who can do things on their own. Because
Mhm.
beyond that, that's where you need a help of a practitioner.
Mhm.
Now, like, you gave a very great example, like how your body did not do very well with chelation. So
Mhm.
like I saw this lady, like, who was 57-year-old lady who came to see me 3 months ago. She was having like Hashimoto's disease, like she was like, suffering from it even longer than 5 years. A lot of brain fog, a lot of fatigue, tiredness, gut issues she was having. Somebody told her, well, toxins are a major problem for Hashimoto's. Why don't you buy this detox protocol online and start doing it? She started
Yeah.
doing the detox protocol, and 1 month into the detox protocol, her body completely gave up.
Mhm.
She was just not able to remember anything. Her brain fog was so bad. Her fatigue was so bad that she had to take 2 naps just to function during the day. Her memory was got so bad, so she had to go to the neurologist. When she went to the neurologist, she was diagnosed with dementia,
Oh
saying that,
my
okay, well, you are
gosh.
actually early stage of dementia. So she was completely like, depressed by the time she saw me, because she said, well, I think I did it to myself, by doing the detox. So I told her, well, that's okay. Like you didn't knew better. That's fine that you did, but let's look what was going on. So she was correct. She did had mold toxins in her system, but that detox protocol, because there are several stages of detoxification, that detox protocol was only focusing on the first stage. And that first stage, what it does is that the toxins, the mold toxins are hidden into our environmental body. in our bones, in our fatty tissues and things. It just bring all those toxins from that hiding places out in the blood. And it was not getting those toxins from the blood out of the body. So
Mm.
all those toxins were actually running in their body, in the blood, and actually that completely kind of overburden our brain system. So then actually we had to revise our whole plan, work on the gut. All we opened up all the detoxification pathways and kind of finally made a stepwise plan to get all those mold toxins out. It took us 4 months. Then finally her brain started working. She was able to remember things. She was able to pay attention to things. So she was like, finally, Dr. Gupta, I'm feeling a change, that, I'm coming back to the normal of what I was. So
Wow.
that's what I tell people, that, it's good to get information, but it's also important to know what you are doing, not do things on your own,
Hmm.
because things can backfire.
Hmm. So you do work with clients one-on-one?
Yeah. So actually, we started this virtual functional medicine practice, 3 years ago, since the COVID came in. And so we are working virtually with people literally like from all over the world.
Wow.
US, Canada, everywhere people can work with us. So they can get all the consultations. We recommend them all the great supplements. We have, especially in US and Canada, we can ship the supplements to them. We have access to all the advanced testing for
Yeah.
toxins and everything.
Wow.
So we are a completely virtual functional medicine practice. And again, still we are seeing great results with it.
Yes. And I'm going to have all of his links in the show notes for anybody that's interested in working with Dr. Gupta. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It was fascinating. I could sit here and just pick your brain all day, I think, but I'll stop there. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Karen, thank you so much for having me over here. It's always a pleasure to kind of share information and give hope to people that,
Yes.
they can get better. Because I
Yes.
think that's the biggest message that you and me are carrying over here, is that don't let anybody tell you that you have to live a life which is defined by hormones or Hashimoto's or any particular disease. There is hope for you to get better. Just make certain changes and your body is going to listen to you and you can get better.
Couldn't agree more.